Okay, guys, so while we're rebuilding this motor, we're going to go over a relatively common issue. Well, not a very common issue, but it is an issue. Um, and that is you're either going to get it's going to say on your controller DOS failure, or your gate's just going to move a bit and then it'll say gate stalled. And I've got to tell you, um, DOS failure is really more rare. It's more common that the gate will just move and then say gate stalled, and then you'd move it a bit, it says gate stalled, and then it's got maximum collisions for, then it shuts down and starts beeping and shouting at you. So what's going on here? Um, that is generally a DOS sensor issue. And what the DOS stands for is Digital Origin Seeking System. So essentially, the motor needs to know where is closed and where is open. This is what happens when you're setting the limits. Now, when you're setting the limits, it's relying on three different things. It is relying on a current spike when it gets to the one end, a current spike when it gets to the other end. The other thing is your origin marker, and this consists of a magnet which sits on the gate, and then the sensor which sits over there. And then it's relying on the DOS sensor itself, which you're going to recognize as this little thing in the front here that says no oil allowed. And there's a very good reason for no oil allowed, because no oil is allowed. So what is it actually doing? This is your drive shaft, okay? And here you can see that little hole over there. And in that hole, there's a plastic clip that goes in, which we're going to show you. That's this one. Passes in there. There's only one way it can go in, and that fits in from the top. It actually goes in like that. And then you got the sensor itself, and what the sensor does, this is a shaft encoder. So you see this disc in here. This disc over here has got little holes in it. So this guy comes down and he goes over there, and he's actually shooting. You can see it's got the contacts here and here, and it's shooting a signal through, and then it's on, off, and you can see as your shaft turns, it really works like ABS brakes. It just says no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, and it's counting those no's and yes and no's and yes. So when your gate is moving, it's constantly counting where it's at. We're going to show you in the diagnostics, if we can find it. The firmware is different, how to check that count, and you'll see it's counting so many times per minute. So what happens when you set the limits? It wants to know with the origin marker where exactly that gate is and which direction it's going. So this works in two directions. As that moves across, and if you feel it over here with two fingers, you'll feel there is a sort of flip-flop steel that is moving from one side to the other. And that's why when you put your gate on manual and then you take it off manual, you'll see it goes slowly until it senses that. Then it knows which direction it is, and it knows how many counts it is until the end, because you've set your limits up. So if any of these components start to fail, especially the DOS sensor, it will either ask you to constantly set limits, but more likely than not, it's going to say gate stalled. So what I just want to show you in here is the gearbox, right? When you screw that in, it pushes in on that, and you'll see there's a cotter pin on a spring that if you push it, it starts coming out. That's why you got to screw it in to put it in manual and unscrew it. And then that cotter obviously comes out. This thing spins freely until it finds its gap. That's why you've got to move the gate a bit to get it back off manual. So when we slide this in, now I'm not going to do a full assembly just yet until we're ready. That goes in there. And then this, now you can see it's in position. Let's have a look in there. you can see exactly there's that disc. Sometimes when this is in, so let's pop it in, that hole, that gap needs to end up about there. So, oh, there's a piece that isn't in yet, and that is the front cover. So we're going to put the front cover on, and I'm just going to put it in position for now. I'm not assembling. Sometimes when you have that DOS sensor failure, you can actually just take out the DOS sensor, unscrew that, and look to see in there, right in there. Let's zoom in. Is that even going to work? No, it's not. It is. Ha! So you can see over there if that thing has got grime or specifically oil. So oil is the problem. And this is the one, there are two causes that can cause this DOS sensor to fail. The first cause, now this is the whole DOS harness. That plugs into the origin sensor, and that's a whole DOS system, and that goes into the controller. If you unplug that, it's going to say DOS failure. If this fails, it's just going to say gate stalled. Then what happens? Now you see that goes in there. What can happen? So this can fail, and you can see there's, the sensor itself. It's an electronic item. So that's what happens. This does come out, and you can clean it, and you can replace it, but usually your DOS sensor comes in a whole harness like this. Always better just get the whole harness because, these connections can also come loose. So what's actually I think the biggest cause of failure here is that there are two O-rings. You can see them sitting here. One sits on the inside, one sits on the outside. And that holds the gear oil in the gearbox over here. And this must remain dry. So what happens is it leaks. And then this slowly in front here starts to fill up with oil. And then you get oil on there. And that oil it's very heavy oil. It's high pressure EP oil. It's fully synthetic. So it's not very thin oil, and it's able enough to block up these holes, which stops your DOS sensor from reading. And if that happens, it means these oil seals have failed. Your motor's leaking oil. You can see oil coming out the front. And then you've got to rebuild the motor. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you can't get this gear off, you either take the motor into Centurion or you got to throw it away. My advice is rather throw it away, and because it's a hell of a job to rebuild it. And often you're going to see by that time your shaft is gone. Here I have cleaned it up a bit. And those are the failures that would cause this. It's not something that's going to go away. It's not a quick fix unless it's just the DOS sensor failure. And that is basically what is happening in your machine and what it's actually looking for. It needs to know where it is. It needs to know when it's open. It needs to know when it's closed. And this also assists in when your gate is in pedestrian mode. So pedestrian mode, that's why this has to be a minimum of 500 millimeters away from the motor if your gate's opening, whichever way. And that's why it opens up till then for pedestrian mode. So all these things are very important, and they have to be done in conjunction and according to the operating manual. So that's basically what's happening with your gate stalled, permanently gate stalled. And I've had it before where that was so rusted shut. There you have to take it off to get this out, and there was just no ways that was going to come out. It just wasn't, and pretty much, got to bin that and replace. So that was the cheapest option, because if you're following the whole playlist, you're going to see that this motor rebuild is not a small job in any way. So guys, I hope that helps you out, and stay tuned for more.